Hello, and welcome to the Asterisk 14 Under the Hood webinar. My name is Pete Engler, and with me today I have Matt Fredrickson. Matt is our Asterisk project manager here at Digium. We're glad that everybody took some time out of their day to be on this webinar to hear all about the great new and exciting things that we have launched with Asterisk 14. Before we get started with the content, I just want to do a few housekeeping items. Once again, thank you everybody for attending. Everybody is in listen-only mode. So at the end of the webinar, Matt will be doing a question and answer session. So if you have a question, please enter it into your Q&A panel on your On24 interface, and you can see that panel in on your screen. And we will answer all of those questions at the end of the webinar. If we run out of time, we'll answer the questions via email. And just to let everybody know that once the webinar is over, in the next day or two, you'll receive an email where you can download all of the slides and get some additional information on Asterisk. So one of the things that we'd like to do before we get started is find out what everybody's role is. So on the screen, there's a poll question. And the question is, which of these best describe you? Are you an end user? Are you a developer, integrator, reseller, distributor, or a vendor? So if everybody could just take a minute just to answer that question, please. And that would be very helpful for us. So I'll give everybody just a minute. We are very excited about all of the new things that are coming in Asterisk 14. I don't want to steal Matt's thunder. But as soon as the poll question ends, we will turn it over to Matt. So it looks like everybody's submitting their information, which is great. Thank you so much. Okay, what I would like to do now is turn it over to Matt. Matt, if you would like to go ahead and start, please do.
Sure. Thank you very much, Pete. So today I get to talk with you folks a little bit about Asterisk 14 and some of the neat things that we're doing with it. I wanted to start off and give you a little bit of a personal background. So those of you who are more intimately familiar with the Asterisk project may realize that, you know, what's going on here and where's Matt Jordan. And for those of you who don't know or who aren't aware, Matt Jordan was the previous Digium Asterisk project lead. And so I'm actually standing in for him right now. I've worked at Digium since 2001 in various different developmental capacities, so I've been here for a long time. I've worked on Asterisk over the years at different times, closer and sometimes and other times further away. I have worked a lot on the hardware side of the business as well, so developing a lot of our hardware products, the drivers for them, and helping to kind of design them and things like that. I've maintained the RISDN stack, libPRI, and the DOTI drivers, the DOTI driver stack as well. Some people call me, or I guess you could say I'm a self-proclaimed lover of dead telephony protocols. For those of you who still love those, I wrote an SS7 stack for Asterisk called libSS7, which there's a good number of people that use that around the world. And then after that, I spent a number of years working on WebRTC-related initiatives here at Digium and learning more about that emerging ecosystem and trying to figure out good ways to meet the market with that. And I guess more recently, in the last 6 to 8 months, I was approached here at Digium, and I was asked to manage the Asterisk group and the Asterisk project and take over for Matt Jordan as the open source team lead. And for me, that was very exciting. It was, truth be told, in a lot of ways it seemed like the opportunity to come back home, because I've always enjoyed working with Asterisk, and I've worked with Asterisk over the years quite a bit. And so I was super excited to be able to do that and work with all the really smart engineers and people that work on the Asterisk project. So I'm going to give a little bit of a connection as far, a little bit of news as far as what's going on with Asterisk and with Digium. So the big reason I moved into this position is Matt Jordan moved into the CTO role here at Digium, so he could have more oversight over various parts of the company. So with that, I get the opportunity to focus a little bit more on the Asterisk side, which I was really excited about. We also, for those of you who keep on top of the development side of things with Asterisk, there was a prominent community developer, George Joseph, who worked for Digium, or who worked a lot on Asterisk from the open source side, and we hired him and added him to our team here at Digium as well. And of course, at the topic of this webinar, we recently released Asterisk 14, so those are some exciting things that are going on here at Digium with the Asterisk project. I just want to take a few minutes to talk about something I think is really important to take note of, and that's really some of the opaque numbers that are involved with Asterisk 14. So some of these slides I pulled from a presentation I gave at Astra DevCon that runs concurrently, or at the beginning of our AstraCon conference, and I felt like that they were appropriate in terms of understanding what Asterisk 14 is and the scope of the amount of work that went into it. And if you look at some of these statistics, there were 1,300 different changes that were individual changes that were included in Asterisk 14. That is a huge number of changes. Also, if you look, there are 91 different contributors, and the vast majority of these contributors are not just from Digium, people that work at Digium. So I think that's important to highlight because it shows that Asterisk is continuing to grow and is a huge, not just Digium or not just US project, but worldwide project. And there's large numbers of people that are interested in it and like to change it and contribute to it. Kind of the way that I structured this talk is into a few basic categories. The first one is Asterisk is better infrastructure. So for those of you that deploy Asterisk in large-scale infrastructure environments, where you may have lots and lots of Asterisk instances that you manage, maybe in a virtualized platform or in bare metal, or if you've got you manage Asterisk at some sort of network levels or at some scale that particularly involves, perhaps building your own ITSP or things like that. Asterisk running in an infrastructure type environment. So there are a few things I want to talk about with regards to that context. The second one is an initiative, for those of you who aren't familiar with ARI, Asterisk RESTful Interface. It was started a few releases ago in Asterisk. It was created a few releases ago, sorry. And it is a way to connect Asterisk to a more web-centric world. And a lot of web developers and things like that are more familiar using a REST-based interface. And so a decision was made at Digium to try to meet that world better and create ARI. And so the last few revisions of Asterisk have been spent creating and fleshing out that API. And so we continue to do so. That's a long-term initiative at Digium, is to continue to enhance and make those APIs better. The major topic or principle, I guess you could say, is we wanted to try to make Asterisk easier to get started for new users. So people who are downloading and using Asterisk for the first time, or maybe building it for the first time, and trying to make that process, make less friction with that process and that more pleasant to use. And I have kind of an opaque bucket at the end, which is more features, and I've got a couple things to talk about there as well. So let's move forward. So the first feature I want to talk about is the ability to, Asterisk 14 has the ability to publish extension state. And actually, I didn't mention this in the last slide, but some of the features I'm going to talk about today actually, due to the more liberal inclusion policy on the 13 branch, were allowed to be merged into 13 as well. So that's kind of a bonus for those of you that are either going or still using 13. Although some of them are exclusive, and I'll talk more about that later. This is one of the exclusive 14 features, which is the ability to publish Asterisk extension state to an external entity, like an event state compositor, in a standards compliant way. So you may have a situation where you have a phone and it's connected to Asterisk, and you make calls with it, and you want Asterisk to be able to publish to an external event state compositor, like SIP proxy or something like that, that event state to be able to distribute to any SIP devices that may be subscribed to that event state compositor. And why would you want to do that? Maybe that's a question that you may be asking for those of you who haven't done this before. And a lot of times as you get a larger and larger system is you may want to distribute parts of your functionality out and to break it out into role-specific instances or units. And this is a way that you can break out the management of subscriptions, SIP presence and other event subscriptions onto an external entity and keep that outside of Asterisk. Also, it allows you to build bigger systems as well when you design that way. So this is kind of a more end-to-end diagram of it where, let's say you started a call with your phone, and at that point you want to, that the extension associated with that phone or the extension state associated with that phone changes. So Asterisk in that circumstance would send a publish message to your event state compositor, which would in turn talk to any other phones that are subscribed to that particular extension state via the SIP notify message. And this kind of gives a good overview diagram of that process. And so how do you want to do this, or how does this happen if you would like to make it happen? So this is a PJSIP specific feature. So it's with our new PJSIP channel driver. And for those of you who are not familiar, that is our recommended path going forward. We've got 2 SIP channel drivers in Asterisk. One of them ChanSIP and one ChanPJSIP. And ChanSIP is very old, very mature, and and for those of you who don't know the background, it reached a state where it was very challenging to develop on due to the way it was originally designed. And so a number of years ago, there was a decision made to focus on a new SIP stack for Asterisk that's structured in a better way to work on, so that when we make changes, we're not so concerned that there's a lot of unintended consequences with breakage and things like that. And so the support for this was added in the PJSIP channel driver. And in order to configure it, if you're familiar with PJSIP configuration, you've got little sections for different parts of the configuration process, and you set build a section with a type outbound publish, and then you stick in your server URI and from URI the IP address or DNS name of your event state compositor that you want to use of choice. And there's a little bit more information about this on some of the wiki documentation and things like that, how you do it. But essentially, you can select a context to forward extension state from. It can be a pattern. Also, you can set the body type. So there's a number of permissible different body types for a SIP publish method that are standards compliant. And in this case, we're setting it to be application dialog info XML. And so this allows you to, this is how you would go about configuring this particular functionality. And what that'll do is it'll start sending extension state from the user's context to 172.16.0.100. So what is this other entity, the event state compositor that we keep talking about? Well, we know for sure a lot of SIP proxies support it. And so we know for sure Camilio supports this with the presence module. So you can have phones subscribe to presence on Camilio using the presence module. I think OpenSIPs as well supports this as well, but I don't think we've tested that, but I believe it also has a similar module as well. And anything else that can act in that role. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about our next topic. There's something else that's exclusively in Asterisk 14, and that's a new DNS API. And every few years, it seems like there are improvements in the ways that telephony protocols utilize DNS, or in how Asterisk interacts with DNS, that we find that we can improve the Asterisk experience and functionality with Asterisk, and better interoperate with ITSPs that use DNS creatively and things like that. So in Asterisk 14, there was an addition of a new DNS API to resolve some of the limitations that we found in previous versions of Asterisk. It now has plugin-based resolvers, so there are plugins to use different DNS resolvers, and you can use the system resolver, which is kind of a default system resolver that's typically installed with most Linux systems. But also, the really cool one is to support a library called libunbound, which is a really, really nice DNS resolution interface. It also supports DNSSEC and a lot of really other cool features, and that really is where you start bringing some new things to the table. So as part of the goals for the new DNS API and some of the things that it accomplishes is ChamPJSIP now supports NAPTR records. And for those of you who are familiar with NAPTR records, or who aren't familiar with NAPTR records, they provide kind of a mapping of services, the different servers that can handle them within the domain. And it also has facilities for order and preference. And one of the other cool things about NAPTR is you can specify protocols in it, so TCP versus UDP and things like that. So it's a really, really rich way to specify DNS information about systems that you're building. Another goal, or some other goals for the DNS API is ChamPJSIP now supports, it looks for SRV records and better supports, I guess more properly supports them. And so this allows Asterisk to support SRV-based load balancing for your SIP providers. So those of you that have upstream ITSPs and SIP providers that do SRV-based load balancing or failover, this allows Asterisk to look up all those records and then act properly based on them in both environments. And the last thing I kind of want to talk about with regards to the new DNS API is ChamPJSIP now looks for Quad A records, so those are IPv6 records if IPv6 is configured as one of the SIP transports. All right, so some examples for the failover. The way that it works is if you look up an SRV, if you look up a record and the SIP request is sent but doesn't receive a response, it tries the next target in the transport list for failover. And that's kind of the way failover works. As far as SRV-based load balancing, that works down. The example is if you've got a weight of an SRV, if you've got two SRV records for a particular DNS name, and one has a record with weight 1, the other one with weight 2, the second record with weight 2 would receive 2/3 of the traffic, and the first one would receive 1. And so ITSPs can use that now. Asterisk can support that with ITSPs that want to use that. Or you can use it in your infrastructure as well. All right, so one of the other things that we can talk about, for those of you that are familiar with the ELK stack, so that's Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, who are building out kind of a new age infrastructure on virtualized environments, things like that. It's a very popular logging infrastructure. The preferred, there are ways to do this for that, but the preferred transport is, or the preferred transport format for logging in this context is usually JSON, like JSON structured logs. And Asterisk historically has not supported JSON structured logging. And so what we've added in Asterisk is the ability to have these log formatters. So if you look down at the log line where it says full equals greater sign and then that bracketed JSON, this is in logger.conf. You can add this log format parameter, this JSON at the front in the brackets. You can add that to the front and it'll send log messages out in a JSON format instead of Asterisk's traditional kind of printf-based structure. And you also may notice that this feature was one of the ones that was permissibly backported to 13 as well. So that's kind of nice. An example of what this looks like is on the next slide right here. This is kind of what it'll look like. Is you'll get a line that comes out, it's bracketed up, it's structured JSON, and this is actually just a big blob of, it looks like a big blob, but there's structure in there, there's name value pairs, and there's some structure inherent to it. You can see the host, the timestamp, you can see where the message came from, and then you can see the message itself. And so, that's an example of it. All right, so next goal was to expand Asterisk's RESTful interface. And so one of the things that, this is a continual process as we go through and we figure out areas that are pain points for people that use it a lot and developers that choose to build applications on Asterisk based on the RESTful interface, where they find things that are easy to do and things that are harder to do. And there are different types of things that or different classes of features that we've added. Some of them are in the category of things that were impossible to do before, and others on from the standpoint of things that were hard to do before, but possible in some way or another. So this one is one that was you're somewhat able to work around, but it kind of made the interface a little bit more painful, and that's the ability to retrieve recordings via ARI. We could not do that previously, so you could work around it by adding like an FTP server or some other way of pulling those recording files off the file system via a back channel of some sort, or you could say a side-mounted HTTP or FTP server. But now you can pull those recordings directly from Asterisk via the REST interface, and so that's kind of nice. It it makes it less necessary to have like a shared distributed file system as well, and it flushes out the ARI interface a little bit more. Also, the ability to play media from remote sources, so remote HTTP sources. And this is pretty cool because what it means is you won't need to share all your, well, up front, it makes it so that it's not quite as necessary to share all your recordings. If you've got a number of asterisks deployed and they each have different roles, you can have your centralized store of media, and you can have Asterisk pull it on demand as it needs it to play back and things like that. And also it'll cache it locally as well, which is pretty cool. So that's kind of a neat feature that is part of 14 as well. So let's see, what else? We've got one of the kind of pain point areas in the REST interface was actually playing back lists of files. And in order to do that, it required a number of different you had to wait for a completion event as far as playback, and then on the client-side code, if you're writing a REST application, you had to act on that and then initiate playback of your subsequent file if you got lists of files. And it was somewhat painful, and it was it made developing with ARI a little bit more, a little bit less pleasant, I guess you could say. And so the addition of media playlists, so you can specify a list of files to play back up front, and Asterisk will go through and play through each one of them for you, is to help to try to make that interface a little bit less painful. Let's see. This falls into the category of things that we couldn't previously do with the REST interface that you can now do. And there were people previously with the REST interface that you were allowed to interact with the Asterisk channels after the point where the call was answered. That was a limitation that was part of the interface as it was designed. And there were some people that found this to be too restrictive, and it also made it challenging to hear things if you have, in-band notifications and ringback and ringtone or whatever prior to the point where it was answered that you wanted to forward through or pass through to the calling party. This was challenging to do. In fact, it was not possible to do. And so we added the ability to be able to access channels before they've reached the answer state. And you can bridge early media and things like that, which is really cool. This also allows you to be able to set channel variables on channels prior to the point of making a call. So if you want to do some creative things that Asterisk allows you to do related to that, this enables you to do that via the REST interface. All right, let's see. So another thing that may be of interest for those of you who are building highly performant systems, it's very popular to use Asterisk real-time database interface. And this is good, but as far as good, better, best, real-time is good. It makes it easy for those of you who have a strong database background and things like that, like using database for management configuration. It allows you to scratch that itch. But for any application, any C application, or any system application, the fastest possible way to get configuration information is from memory, and not having to pull it or to pull it on demand from a database. And so if you want a really, really high performance system, a lot of times what you'd need to do was you'd need to you could tune your caching and things like that through some of the caching layers, the configuration caching layers, and try to do things with that. But that's kind of that can be challenging for a lot of people if you're not very experienced with the way that the caching system works in Asterisk. The configuration caching system works. And so the other option is you keep your configuration in like flat files or whatever, and you just do reloads with Asterisk whenever something changes. This gives you a third option, and that's the ability to push configuration directly to, in this context, we're talking about PJ-SIP, be able to push, like if you need to add a SIP endpoint, this allows you to push via the REST interface new configuration information into memory into Asterisk. And this is really powerful, and this allows you to have a lot of the same performance advantages you have with keeping configuration information in memory and outside the database in a lot of contexts. But also be able to very dynamically change things around as needed. So that's something interesting for people who have systems that may need to have that requirement. I want to talk a little bit about some of the changes that make Asterisk easier to build. So for those of you that build Asterisk, either whether it be your first-time user or you're an integrator that builds it into some sort of system, and your responsibility is to do that, for those of you that have done that in the last couple of revisions of Asterisk, there's an addition of a requirement for lots of different parts of Asterisk, but most particularly the PJ-SIP channel driver, and it's the PJ project library. And a lot of systems have elected to build that library in the system, so there's a system library that you can pull a lot of times for that. But for those of you that build it by hand or want a more recent version of it and keep on top of it, it can be challenging. Particularly the first time you do it, it can be challenging. There's special configuration options you have to pass to it in order to use it, in order to build it. And if you don't get them right, sometimes you can have unintended consequences, and things don't play out the way they should. And so this was enough of a pain point that we merged in the option to be able to have Asterisk itself be able to go download the PJ project library itself, the most recent version that it can use, and apply any patches that maybe Asterisk developers have found that we need to apply against it and that haven't been contributed upstream yet, or haven't been merged in upstream yet in a release, and allows us to be able to better to improve the experience of that process and takes a lot of the pain out of it. And some of the other reasons we decided to do this was this allows us also to make sure that end to end we know what versions of things are running. We know, if somebody's submitting a bug, this helps us to very clearly understand what version of PJ project's involved and what code is being used, and be able to control that experience very well, and allows us to better be able to handle submitted bugs and things like that, understand the problems that are involved. And Asterisk as a project is one of the more extensive users of the PJ project library, and so we run into situations where, not infrequently, where we run into bugs that we have to fix sometimes upstream in the PJ project library. And so this allows us also, as I mentioned, to distribute patches as we find things that need to be merged, that we can also be more nimble, and we can keep the patches locally and apply them as they're downloaded until they get merged upstream into a new version, and we can update to it. So it allows us to be able to provide a better experience with that library. And in order to utilize it, when you're building Asterisk and you run the configure script, if you look at the bottom, you add that flag, the -- with -pj project -bundled, and that should automatically download it, apply the patches, and build it into Asterisk. So going forward, this is not the default, but I could imagine at some time in the future this could be the default way that we integrate with PJ project. This is definitely the recommended way to build Asterisk going forward if you are utilizing it and building, particularly if you're building it for other people and you need to be able to submit bugs and things like that. This helps us out a lot. All right. So back to real time. We found in the course of 13 lifecycle, we found that there were some issues with the real-time interface and how we interact with the database. And one of the problems that we found was that we weren't utilizing connection pooling, which for those of you who've worked in the web world, that's a big oh man. But we weren't utilizing connection pooling in a way that could have helped us from a performance perspective. And so what we did was we added support for connection pooling in the ODBC layer for Asterisk. So stipulations, this requires Unix ODBC version at least 2.3.2. So if you don't have that on your system, this is not going to work, and it doesn't build, it doesn't allow you to do this. It'll just fall back to single connection behavior. We found that there were a couple different bugs in the ODBC, Unix ODBC library that we encountered in related pooling, that in some of the versions of it that you needed at least 2.3.2 for it to work, for us to be able to provide an experience that worked well. And in order to enable it, in your resodb.conf, if you look at the bottom, in the section you enable for your database, add that line, the max_connections. In that section, it says max_connections is 20. And that allows Asterisk to try to share 20 different connections to pool 20 different connections to the database. And to confirm that it worked, since this is Unix ODBC version dependent, this is kind of a good idea to do, make sure it works on your system, is you can run the ODBC show all command at the Asterisk command line, and it'll dump your configs and things like that. If you look at that last line, it says number of active connections, and it says, in this case, it says 2 out of 20. That out of 20 is the important part, and tells you that that the configuration parameter took effect. And actually, this is a feature that was able to go into 13 as well. We were able to get that one into 13. So, some of these features, like I said, are 14 exclusive, but there are a few that we're able to merge into 13 due to its more liberal merging or contribution policy or merging policy. All right. So last thing I wanted to briefly mention was there have been some AppConf Bridge performance improvements. There's some people that have tried to run very large conferences, and we found that in the course of working with them and trying to figure out what was wrong, there were pauses in audio in some of these on some of these systems, and we were trying to figure out what was wrong. And we discovered that there were some issues with the way that some of the things that were done in the real-time mixing threads for the audio. In Asterisk, we realized that we were doing some DNS queries in there that we probably shouldn't have been doing, and that kept it from being able to, particularly when you have large numbers of participants, it kept it from being able to keep up with the mixing on the mixing stream. And so we were able to isolate those and get rid of a number of them to have Asterisk perform a lot better in that type of environment. All right, so and there's a lot more. There's so many more things I could talk about. This is just a sampling. 1,300 commits. I can't go through them all in a 1-hour webinar, but there are tons and tons of things that have been changed and added. And I would urge you, if you're curious about more, to look at the changes file that comes bundled with Asterisk, the upgrade file, and you can also look at the commit history as well if you'd like. I just want to talk a little bit more about the project for those of you who aren't familiar with how kind of things work from a project perspective. So Asterisk 11 was released in October 2012. 12 was released in December 2013. 13 was released in October of 2014. And if you look at Asterisk 14, it was released in September of 2016. So it's very, very recent. So you may look at that and you say, okay, well, what is that LTS thing mean that you're talking about? And I'll talk a little about what that means. So Asterisk, the way that the Asterisk developers support the branches of Asterisk is, at some point we have to decide a branch is done. Everybody loves their favorite branch, but at some point, from a development perspective, we can only stretch ourselves so far, and we have to decide when to quit working on something or when to start scaling back our efforts. And so the way it works for an LTS release, which Asterisk 11 and 13 are, it receives bug fixes to the branch for 4 years, followed by a year of only security fixes. So if there's a security vulnerability that comes up, then we make releases based on those security vulnerabilities. But otherwise, at that point, there are no new bug fix releases. Standard releases, they receive bug fixes for a year, followed also by a year of only security fixes. So there's a little bit shorter support life cycle. So the 14 that we just released is actually a standard release. And you may have questions why you have 2 years between 13 and 14. What is that going to do in terms of support life cycle of some of the branches involved. So what we did in order to cover the support side of it is we decided to extend the bug fix life of 13 an additional year, and this, or at least to compensate for the fact that there was a 2-year delta between 13 and 14. Typically, there's a 1-year delta between major asterisk release, and there was a 2-year delta there. So that allowed us to kind of work with that. But you may be wondering why did it take 2 years for 14 to come out after 13? And I would say that with the 13 life, the 13 branch, there were some changes in our contribution policy. So with 13, we started to allow people to actually add new feature changes into the branch. But that was with a strong stipulation that an added test for the Asterisk test suite was added for that new feature. If you didn't add a test for it, then you can contribute that feature to the 13 branch. Also, between 13 and 14, we spent a lot of time working on our testing infrastructure and improving our automated testing so that we understood better when regressions popped up and when there were problems that came up, and allowed us to be a better development team. And so that took a little bit more time to get a lot of those things in order, and then the corresponding asterisk changes to make it better support some of those tests. And so all this work is kind of an investment in our future, and allows us to create more stable releases of Asterisk. And so I would dare say to you that I would expect that 14 is probably one of the most initial stable releases of Asterisk that we have built. And so the other side of that also is, although we did allow adding new features to the 13 branch, if there was a feature or a change that was significant enough, there were some changes that we reserved the right to not merge them in, to not throw off the stability of the branch. And there were a few of those that occurred, like the new DNS APIs and some of the SIP publish support, or PJ SIP publish support, and a couple others that I discussed today early, dialing with the ARI, some of the ARI features and things like that, a number of things like that that we felt were invasive enough that we didn't feel comfortable with putting that in 13. And so they just went into 14. And so anyway, that's kind of the explanation there. I already kind of discussed this, but from a support perspective, like I said, 2 years between 13 and 14, this is the bug fix support thing I talked about. We added the additional year to the 13 branch to be able to cover it up. So I'm not going to go into more detail on that. All right, for those of you that missed it, excuse me, that missed it at AstriCon, Digium has Digium Legal has cleared us to have a codec opus implementation for Asterisk, which was really exciting for us because we've been trying to figure out. There's been a lot of people that have been very interested in this, and we haven't had a good answer for them at this point, or at least an answer, a codec answer. And so we finally have a release of codec opus for Asterisk, and it was released at the same time as the 14 version of Asterisk. And so stipulations about it, it is a binary module, and this is so that we can anonymously track usage of the module itself. This is not about Asterisk tracking or anything else, but this is about being able to understand how many people are using it in case somebody comes to us with big legal papers or something like that and wants to know it for important reasons, so that we can understand what our usage and what our community usage is and things like that. And those statistics are anonymized, and they're not tied to particular servers or IP addresses or anything like that. And so hopefully that there's some comfort with that. And it is, to make it less friction and easier for people to use, it's downloadable via menu select. For those of you that build Asterisk and use menu select, you can select it in menu select, and it'll automatically download it and install it when you're running make install for Asterisk. So that's most of what I want to talk about today. Just a friendly reminder that Asterisk 11 went into security fix mode in October. So for those of you that are using it still, it's been a good time for a while, but it's getting to be more and more important to move forward to Asterisk 13 and 14. The 11 branch is not going to be receiving new bug fixes and things like that. So it's a good time to get moving to Asterisk 13 or 14 if you haven't done that yet. All right, and that's it from my perspective. I think I'm going to turn the time back over to Pete to discuss a few things. Pete, thank you very much, and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Matt. That was a really great summary, and I'm sure everybody can understand why Matt was chosen to be the Asterisk project manager. And when Matt Jordan moved on to become our CTO, which is a great pick as well. So what I want to do real quick, right before we go into the Q&A, is just let everybody know and remind everybody that as well as maintaining and sponsoring the Asterisk project, here at Digium we also have a complete line of Asterisk hardware. So to complete your solution, we have a complete line of VoIP gateway, telephony cards, and also phones for your solution, which when you use the Digium phone module for Asterisk has a really deep integration with Asterisk. If you haven't seen our phones lately, we've just released a brand new lineup of all color display phones, and these are great looking phones and work very well and deeply integrated, like I said, with Asterisk. So one of the things that we also like to stress is that all of the products that we build for Asterisk are certified and guaranteed to work with Asterisk. And when you do make purchases of these products, you are supporting the Asterisk project. We hire and employ several developers who do nothing but work on Asterisk software, and that software, of course, is provided at no cost to our community. And we've been the maintainer and sponsor for 17 years now, so we're very committed to that project. I also would like to reiterate that for North America customers, we do have Digium SIP trunking available. So if you need SIP trunks, we have local and we have metered and flat rate options for Digium SIP trunking. So just wanted to bring that up and remind everybody that we have these products to offer as well. So right before we go into the Q&A, I'd like to ask one more poll question if I could. So is there anything that we can help you with from here? So if you would like to talk to somebody about your project, or put in touch with a local reseller integrator, or are you interested in our reseller program, or if you're just researching and you don't need any help, that's fine too. We'd just like to know. So if there's anything we can do, we are very interested in helping our Asterisk developers and customers with any projects that they might have. And thank you all for your submissions. So with that, we will go ahead and let Matt do the Q&A. So if you have a question, please enter it into your Q&A panel on your screen. And Matt, if you'd like to go ahead and just read off some of the questions and answer them, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I'll see what I can do. Let's see. I'll look through. All right. Okay, there's a question that says, it is said that the even number release of Asterisk are test only, but you appear to position 14 as the most stable release. Is this true? So yes, I did make. Let me just clarify what I said. So all release versions of Asterisk are release versions of Asterisk. None are test versions. Some people have a need for a longer version, a longer support life. So in telecom world, particularly for building equipment, it seems like there's, from an equipment perspective, there's a longer support life cycle associated with that. And so we decided to add some version of that of Asterisk to have a longer bug fix version of it. That was to answer that demand. And so that's why the LTS releases were created. And so the question that the even releases of Asterisk test only, that's not true. That's not correct. As far as positioning 14 as the most stable release, I make that from the perspective of we have Asterisk 14 was born in the fire of all the great, I guess, alluding to the the analogy of like the phoenix being born or whatever. But in any case, it was born in all the great testing improvements that we created in the 13 branch, and it benefits from all those great improvements in terms of being able to produce a more reliable and stable initial version of Asterisk, right? And so, of new feature branches or new feature releases and new stable branches of Asterisk, its first release was created with all those tests already in place and things like that. So it's in a lot better position to work at least as well as branches beforehand. And that's what I meant by the most stable release. And it should be a lot more stable than a lot of initial new branches are and have been. And so I hope that kind of clarifies that comment. All right. Let's see. Sorry, I got like a frog or something in my throat. Let me look around and see if there's another good question to answer here. Let's see, Pete. Do you want to talk about the SIP trunk one? It says your SIP trunk only work only for US. Did you already answer?
Yes,
It looks
sure.
like you might have answered that one already. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about that?
Just to reiterate for everybody on the line, we do offer SIP trunking. At the current time, it is only available in lower for US 48. So I just wanted to bring that up for our US customers at this time.
Cool. Let's see. Here's another one that I could cover. Is there a plan to release Asterisk 14 RPMs for CentOS Rel 6.7? Right now, so that's a very good question, and actually I'm glad that somebody asked it because it's something that we've discussed a number of times. There have been times in the past where we've created our RPMs for distributions and things like that, and there are times that we haven't, and and that's kind of been, there's different levels of effort in doing that and supporting those. Right now, we don't have a definitive plan to do that, like a definite plan to create custom RPMs for Asterisk outside, obviously, of the distributions themselves, making their own RPMs or whatever. But it's something that we are, it's on our minds, and we've been thinking about maybe doing that again, potentially based on, if we can fit it into our development team time and pipeline and things like that. But there are a lot of aspects of releasing RPMs and things like that are not as easy as you would imagine, and there's some overhead associated with that and things like that. But it's something that's on an ongoing basis on our minds, and we're asking that question ourselves. So thanks for asking that. All right, so let's see what else we have. So Asterisk. Oh, okay. Here's one from Don Hassan, I think. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. But he asks, "Hi, will Asterisk 14 support S7?" And actually, Asterisk 14 supports S7 as well as 13 does, and 11 does, and 10 does, and 1.8 does, and 1.6 does. So it still supports S7 with, from an ISAP perspective. So this is stipulated with the S7 library, libs7, and also using Chandati, and it's supporting ISAP right now. It does not support MAP or TCAP or any of those other parts or whatever right now. So there's a question from Brian. It says, are SRV records included in the new DS API? And a lot of the support for being able to really handle the SRV failover and things like that are included in the new DNS API. So hopefully that helps. Let's see what else we got. Sorry, I'm going through the list right now. Pete, is there one that you wanted to talk about in particular?
We have been getting a lot of questions about the recording and accessing the PowerPoint slides. So I just wanted to reiterate that we will send out an email in the next day or two that will have a link to a landing page where you can download the slides and also a link to a recording. So if you wanted to go back and listen to it again or send that to a coworker or friend to listen to the recorded session, we will have that available. It'll probably take a day or two for us to process the recording and everything and get the landing page set up. So if you don't see anything today, then it will arrive within the next day or two.
Thanks, Pete. Looks like there's another question I saw from somebody named Paul, and he's asked, will the Opus codec be supported in Release 13? And yes, that is planned that it be released in 13 as well. Let's see. All right, Pete, did you have any other ones that you wanted to cover?
No, I think I've answered all the questions that I want to. Are you satisfied?
Just trying to go. Yeah, I was trying to go through and figure out what other ones that we wanted to cover, or whatever, in this presentation.
Okay.
Let's see. I think that's just about it. I appreciate everybody attending and asking questions and things like that, and I will definitely. I'm looking forward to kind of working with many of you or talking with many of you in the future. And I guess I'll turn time back over to Pete.
Okay. Well, thank you, Matt. That was really informative for everybody. And we also here at Digium appreciate everybody taking time out to listen to the webinar and being a Digium and Asterisk customer. So if there's anything that we can help with in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out directly to Digium. You can reach out to one of our channel partners, or you can go to asterisk.org or digium.com and be able to get answers to any of your questions. So with that, we wish everybody a great day, and thank you again for attending. Goodbye.
Bye.